Okay, so we're still in the index.cs HTML page. We're just going to make our way down through this, look for anything curious, catches our eye as a means of uncovering additional functionality for ASP.NET MVC. And as I scroll down past the work that we did in the previous lesson with the action link, the next interesting little bit here is the HTML class's display name for method. Looks like it takes a lambda expression, so given a model, get the model.name property, given a model, get the model.price property. And we want to display the name for those properties. So let's run the application and make sure we understand what's being done here. It's at the very top of the table, and it provides these column headers that clearly denote what we're looking at in that given column. Okay. And what's not obvious about this, because only the defaults are being used here in line 26 and 29, is that these methods are relying on the model in our application, the entity data model that we created, in order to generate this HTML. So if we take a look at the model, let's go ahead and go to the models folder. Inside our EDMX file, let's scroll down. Let's look at the product entities.tt and expand that, and you can see that this product.cs class was generated. And here we have the partial class definition. Hopefully none of this blows you away. Hopefully you remember what we did regarding EDMX files in the C# fundamentals for via ASP.NET web applications, and we see how entities are generated or classes are generated for entities based on their database table definitions. And so here we can see that there is a name property and a price property. Now again, what's not obvious here is that since nowhere on that model is there any additional information about what the name of this property should be displayed as to the end user, it's just going to go ahead and use these property names, and that's why we got name and price. But what if we wanted to change this? What if we didn't want the user to see the name of the property, but maybe something a little bit more friendly to the end user? Then what we could do is add a data annotation, which is essentially just a C# attribute, and this will allow you to add metadata about a given property and other things as well, but specifically properties in this case. So let's do this. Let's create a new, and here, let me, from a previous try, I seem to remember something here. Your code will not have this if you're looking at it with me. So let's just start right there. Okay. Okay, so now let's add a data annotation by adding an attribute above the name, and we're going to call this display. And inside of the, well, you can see this is where we get the red squiggly line and why I had that using statement. Control period on my keyboard, it wants to add the using statement, system.componentModel.data annotations. Yes, let's add that. Okay, you can see where it added it in line 14. And now I want to set the display name equal to product name. A friendly name like that. And you can see that it just applies to the name property. Go ahead and run the application now and see how that has made an appreciable difference in the application. Alright, so now you see here that the column name is now changed to product name instead of just name. Alright, and if you take a look at all of the IntelliSense here, there's a bunch of different things that can be displayed. The order that things should be displayed in, the prompt that you can add inside of the text box, a short name, a description, and some other things. Okay, and we'll learn about some of those later. But there are actually many different data annotations that are available out there. So what you can do is just like grab this right here, grab this namespace, and then go to Internet Explorer and just paste it into Bing or into the nav bar, and that should take you to the MSDN documentation for that. You see I've been there once. And this will give you a list of all data annotations that are available. Now, admittedly, some of these are not to be used on properties. Some of these have a different purpose to be used on controllers and action methods. So you might want to take note and make sure that you understand the purpose for a given data attribute before, data annotation before you apply that attribute to your property. But essentially, as far as applying them to properties are concerned, they're really used for defining three things. First of all, the validation rules for that given property. Is it a required field? If it's a string, how many characters can it be? Things of that nature. What range can the numbers be in validly? The second is for presentation purposes, like we used that display data annotation just a moment ago. And then the third, I guess, major reason that data annotations are used is for data modeling. So denoting the relationship between the different data classes in your entity data model. All right, and many of those will be generated for you automatically. All right, so let's go ahead and shut that down. So what's the point of all this? Why go through all of this just to display the product name? Again, once again, I could just type in the word product name here and not go through all of this rigmarole in order to produce that simple string. Well, think of the power of being able to define how the application should treat a given class property in just one place in your application. And then every time that property is referenced throughout the entire application, the code that's generated for that property will honor those instructions. So if you want a property to be called something else than what we called it in the model, then just set it once in that display data annotation and it'll be used throughout the rest of the application. So let's see that at work here. Not only will we see this on the index page, but if we go to the edit page, you'll see that it also uses that display name. And if we go to the delete, it'll use that full display name as well. Okay, so there's power there, not just for display, but imagine if we want to ensure that we only want to accept a certain range of values, or that the string should only be so many characters long, or that that given field is required. We set it once in the model with the data annotation, and then every time that that field is used, that those instructions are honored in our application. And so take a look at the edit view. We've been looking at index.cshtml. Let's take a look at the edit.cshtml. And if you scroll down, you take a look at the editor for the price, like right here between lines number 28 and 34. We have a label for and an editor for. I want to focus on the editor for. And by default, these methods will look at the data type for the given property and will emit the proper HTML. In this case, it's going to create the correct HTML form field type to allow you to type in either, in this case, a name, a simple string, or a price, which is a numeric value, right? And usually most of the time that just means it's going to output a text box, but there might be some cases where it's different. But what if you don't want to use a text box every time for the price field, or maybe a better example would be for the date? Well, then you can create what are called display templates and editor templates. And every time that, and you can associate it with the price field or some like date time field in your product's entity class, like we did just a moment ago, using data annotations. So then every time that given price field is used, or some date time field is used in the rest of your application, it uses these templates that you define specifically for data entry or editing of that given field. So for example, perhaps every time in your application you want a given property to be formatted as currency, or you wanted it formatted with a specific CSS style, or you want it formatted with specific HTML, you can define that in a display template. Then every time you call display for on that property, it will emit that markup that you define. And the editor for works the exact same way. Perhaps you have a date field, or in this case a price field, and you want to use a special jQuery UI calendar plugin for that date field, so that it allows you to use this rich calendaring functionality and the validation that goes along with it. Well, you can create an editor template and you apply that editor template in the data annotations for that property. Then each and every time that you need to edit or add a record involving that property, you would get the jQuery UI calendar plugin code emitted. All right, so you can see now this is much more powerful than just simple strings. You can the editor for can be used to generate lots of information out for a given property, and every time that property needs to be edited, it can use those templates. And we're going to examine how all this works in an upcoming lesson, but hopefully you can see how powerful the HTML helper methods are. In many situations, they interact with core building blocks in ASP.NET MVC to emit code. Whether you're using your predefined routes to create outgoing URLs like we looked at in the previous lesson, or to emit the proper HTML markup to create a consistent representation for a given property using data annotations. Okay? All right, so let's continue with this thought in the next lesson. See you there. Thanks.